Welcome everyone to this tech talk on OPUS no code fundamentals, which is being delivered by Jerry Meyer. Before I hand over to Jerry, I'm just going to introduce him. So Jerry's been with TraceLink for 10 years, and for anyone who knows our history, he's also worked at SupplyScape. In addition to Jerry's supply chain and compliance background, he's worked with no-code systems for years, most notably in the discrete manufacturing space where he develops CAD and PLM product lifecycle management software products. Again, before I hand over to Jerry, I'm just going to go through our antitrust guidelines. As always, our courses are public, so we just ask you not to engage in any discussions around pricing, deal making, selling, promoting, or any other activities which could be seen as anti-competitive. If you believe the discussions are approaching these boundaries, just say so, and I will stop the discussion until TraceLink legal counsel is consulted before proceeding. And finally, our class guidelines, because our classes are public again, we just ask you to refrain from initiating any discussions about company-specific examples. Having said that, if you do have any company-specific examples you would like to raise, we can look into them after the call, and we can take the discussion offline. This tech talk is being recorded, as are all the tech talks, and is going to be posted up on TraceLink University afterwards. And once Jerry has presented, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions you may have. If you have questions after the tech talk, please feel free to email tracelinkuniversity@tracelink.com. So handing over to Jerry now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. So we are going to talk about some OPUS no-code fundamentals today. And with that, I'm going to jump right in. Let me turn off my video though, so it's not distracting. And so let's go ahead and just jump in now. Let's start with personas. So there's 4 personas that are sort of relevant for this discussion. 3 of these personas, the 3 on the left, are all different flavors of solution designers. And then the last persona on the right is a business user. So I'm going to go through what's different about these various kinds of solution designers. On the far left, I've got an OPUS developer. So as an OPUS developer, they use our OPUS solution environment. And their goal really is to develop multi-enterprise applications and what are called standard solutions for our customers. These standard solutions can be used out of the box to exchange data with network trade partners. They can be used to integrate with enterprise systems and trade partners using transforms and link actions. So that's all about the OPUS developers and what they try to do. These standard solutions is their goal. Now, the next one is a solution designer, but this is a solution partner. So their goal is to develop marketplace solutions for industry market segments that they can publish in the TraceLink's global marketplace solution catalog. This makes it available to OPUS customers. Now, the last solution design we're going to talk about is our customers, the solution designers that work at our customers' places. So their goal is to configure what are called company solutions, and in order to satisfy their company's unique business requirements, while still being able to benefit from TraceLink's integrate once, interoperate with everyone core tenet. So these are 3 different solution designers with very different goals. They all use the same tooling, whether it's our OPUS developer or our customers or our solution partners. They're all using the same solution design application and the OPUS solution environment. Now let's talk about the business users at our customers and at their trade partners locations. So a business user, their goal is to use, say, TraceLink's standard solutions so their company can stay up to date with the latest versions of the software that's released and can leverage new features immediately upon those releases. This is especially important, let's say, for compliance solutions where there's government regulations and you don't want to waste a lot of time when a new regulation kicks in. You want to make sure that, as TraceLink delivers the standard solutions that address those regulations, you want to be up and running using them as quickly as possible. So that's where you would come into play and use a standard solution. Now, the business users also want to use company solutions that are specifically tailored for their business requirements. There's a lot of business processes out there, both internal within our customers' companies' four walls, and business processes with their trade partners that they may want to fine tune or tailor to sort of keep their competitive advantage over others in the industry. So that's where you would use a company solution so you could tailor those processes. And because all these OPUS solutions, or because OPUS, I should say, has what's called an opinionated user interface. This is something we're going to explore a little more later, what we mean by that opinionated user interface. It's easy to use and it's consistent across all solutions, whether it's a standard solution, marketplace, or company solution, so that your employees and your trade partners' employees require minimal, if any, training at all. Okay, so with that backdrop of the four personas that we're really going to be talking about, or that are going to leverage some of the functionalities that we're going to refer to in the rest of this presentation, I'll get started. All right, so I've said no code solutions a lot of times, and we'll put a little bit more of an explanation around that. There are many no code systems out there in different industries, and each of them targets a specific problem space. But they do have a lot of characteristics in common. One is they use metadata to drive and fine tune behaviors, especially related to the user interface. They also optimize around challenges that are of particular importance to their industry. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the common aspects of the no-code OPUS solution environment that'll be easy to relate to, mostly those related to the UI, and then we're going to discuss areas that are of particular importance to TraceLink and the industry that we serve. Okay, so as I already mentioned, we use metadata to enable our no-code capabilities. And what we do is we push that metadata, or those metadata definitions, as far down in the stack as possible to get the most benefit from them. So the further down in the stack we push the metadata definitions, the more we can leverage those metadata differences throughout the rest of the system. So we have three layers primarily. The lowest layer is what's called the metadata-driven business object layer. And here's where we define object types, rich fields, and operations. So what these object types and their characteristics, their rich fields and operations, that's the foundational characteristic and behavior of an application. So that happens at the business object layer. Next, as we move up the stack to the second layer, that's the user interface, this is where we configure standard page types to produce a no-code user experience, meaning we don't use any code when we build UI pages for our various types of solutions. The code for these pages was written one time by core developers on OPUS, and those pages are available, and the way you make them different is you configure them. Okay, so we'll go more into how that configuration works, but there's absolutely no code used when building a user interface or building a solution. And then lastly, the third, the highest layer of the solution metadata, it is the solution metadata. This is what really ties everything together, and it fine tunes specific experiences for your users with defined authorizations, where we use menus, roles, and permissions to sort of bring it all together. Now, most no-code systems out there will have a similar approach to what I've just described as far as layers in the metadata and the ability to drive user interface with them, et cetera. That's going to be fairly common. In fact, a couple examples that I'll talk about they won't be exactly that. They won't call them the exact same things. They may not have exactly three layers, but the general approach will be similar. Couple that you might be familiar with in the CRM or customer relationship management space, Salesforce or Force.com. Salesforce, they focus primarily on the sales pipeline and turning opportunities into sales with accuracy and high levels of predictability and confidence regarding what the final numbers are going to look like for the quarter or for the year. So that's what, that's sort of the problem space that they're trying to solve. Another one for people that are in the IT departments at your company, you work with software, you're likely going to be familiar with Atlassian's Jira defect tracking and software project management tool. This tool focuses on tightly integrating various source control, test automation, and other software development systems to make software development as efficient and easy as possible for developers and coders. Okay, so those are a couple of examples in the industry that they have UI-driven, metadata-driven UI, and they solve very specific problems for their markets. For TraceLink, though, we're all about multi-enterprise applications which are needed to exchange B2B data between supply chain partners. So what we optimize for data that needs to be integrated across many disparate systems. And these systems whose technologies and capabilities vary dramatically. So again, we optimize for data that needs to be integrated across many disparate partners and systems whose technologies and capabilities vary dramatically. Now, I'm going to bring that up a few more times throughout the session, but it is a key thing that really is what makes us what we focus on. And with that said, I'm going to start talking about those layers of metadata. We'll start off with the lowest layer, that business object metadata layer. And here I've already mentioned we have objects, primary objects. In this case, what you want to think about is nouns. The objects of the system are nouns. So business objects represent the domain of an application, such that the users intuitively know what to do with these business objects when they work with them. So if you're in something like Mint, you deal with invoices, purchase orders. If you're in some quality application, then you're going to deal with quality documents. So the users of those applications, they inherently sort of know what they're about. And so that's an important aspect of what is a primary object for an application. Next are the fields on those objects. And here you want to think about the characteristics of the different business objects. Fields capture, it's how you sort of distinguish one business object from another, the fields. You might have fields like supplier name, customer name, product code, or problem description, reference transaction. These are just fields that you would put on a business object, and depending on what fields you put on it, it's going to have some meaning in the context of that business object. And then the third area that I mentioned earlier was operations. So when we have operations at this business object layer, the metadata around operations, you want to think about the verbs. What are in other words, operations are like the actions a user can perform on a business object. I want to create a new purchase order. I want to edit a PO. I want to change the state from drafted to submitted. So I want to send it to my partner. Okay, so those are all the the kinds of metadata that you'll find at the business object layer. Now I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to describe some of the capabilities in a way that relates it that are specific to our B2B domain related to this business object layer. And in this case, I'm going to talk about two types of fields we have. We call them rich fields. One's called a LBR, or lookup by reference, and the other one's called a LBV, or lookup by value. So the lookup by reference, it's a pretty common capability you're probably going to already know about if you're familiar with databases at all. It's a way to relate two different objects in a system, usually done with what's called a foreign key from one table to another table. Many systems will have that concept. So if you're working inside of an ERP system and you have a table of invoices, and an invoice refers to a PO number, you're going to be able to click on that invoice and go directly to that PO that is related to it. That's a pretty common way of addressing things. Challenge is, though, in the world of B2B, where there's all these disparate systems between yourselves and your partners, and you're exchanging data in different ways, that lookup by reference might be a little challenging because you may not have all the data in one system in one place. So here's where we invented something called lookup by value. And we specifically did this for the B2B use cases based on our customers' experiences. So bear with me. I'm going to dive in a little bit deep on lookup by value because it's a pretty cool thing, and it's good to understand it. So recalling that we optimize for data that needs to be integrated across many disparate partners and systems whose technology and capabilities vary dramatically, think about an invoice that includes references to an authorizing PO 123 and an authorizing ASN number 456. Now, those reference transactions may or may not be in the system at the time an invoice shows up. And this might be because the PO or the ASN transaction data are exchanged via maybe email attachments, and the clerical data entry into a company system hasn't occurred yet, or they might be stored in some file cabinet, in case let's say it's a small shop that doesn't really have an enterprise class system to store it in, or it might have gotten stuck somewhere in the B2B infrastructure going between a couple of trade partners. Regardless, it's important to recognize that one transaction may reference data that isn't in the system at the time it's being referenced. So using that hard relationship like lookup by reference really isn't possible all the time when you're exchanging data between partners. Still, the user needs to take the information that's available on that invoice, specifically PO number 123 or ASN number 456, and use it to check some other system, file cabinet, or email inbox attachment, or whatever, so they can review it and confirm whether or not this invoice should be paid. This is a very supply chain B2B domain specific kind of problem because not everything's in one system. It's all being exchanged between all these different partners and different systems. All right. So that's one way that we're trying to address our domain specific problems. There's another use for LBV, which might be of interest also. It's the, let's say you're entering the purchase order through a UI, or one of your partners is entering the purchase order through the UI, and you need to fill out some address information. Well, that data, you're probably familiar with, let's say you're ordering something online from Amazon, and you click on a field and some suggested values might pop up and you click them and it auto-populates. So that stuff's all coming from your browser. It might be stored in a cookie or something. And that's fine for, personal people ordering things via the browser. But if you're doing enterprise to enterprise integrations, you need something a little bit more robust than that. So what we have is this lookup by value can look in some of your other parts of the system. For example, your master data. So as you're typing an address, a lookup by value field, as you type, it knows how to query and see, do you have any master data records that might match this? And then once you see those records coming back, there'll be some distinguishing information about the records. You can click on it. It'll auto-populate the fields if that's how it's been configured for that screen. And because it's a lookup by value and it's not a hard relationship to the master data record, you can even edit some of that information. Because maybe the location that you're ordering from this purchase order is a little bit different than the one that you typically order from. So you want to take some of the information, but then you want to edit maybe the exact building number that you're ordering it from, as an example. So rather than create that hard relationship, we just use the lookup by value to help retrieve information and facilitate some of the UI entry. So again, it might be something you're fairly familiar with on the UI in the web when you're ordering things, but when you're talking about enterprise systems, it's nice to be able to have this sort of middle ground between a hard relationship between information and a little bit of a softer relationship. So now I'm going to move on to finish that little commercial break we did there, because that was a bit deep, and I understand that. But we're going to move up to that UI layer of metadata now. And a little bit about I mentioned earlier, the opinionated user interface that we have on Opus. So I'm showing you three screens. There's a search page, the big one in the middle, a new page over on the right, and a view edit page over on the right. So these are three of the kinds of screens that have been pre-coded in Opus and are ready for people to configure. Now, that opinionated user interface starts off on the left-hand side. You can see on the search page there's a list of menu items: purchase order, invoice, remittance advice, forecast, plan. These are the business objects that are defined at that lowest level. So when I define the menu for an application, I can indicate what menu items I want to show based on roles, and these menu items are business objects. If you click on one of them, most likely you're going to be shown a search result screen where a query is executed and the results of that query are brought back and shown to you in a table. Now that table, we're going to talk more about it later, about how it was configured, but basically those fields that you're seeing on the table when that page was built were just drag and dropped on the screen. But anyway, we're really talking about the navigation here. So now I've got the search results, and if I click on, say, the PO number field, one of the rows in that column, then it's going to take me to the view edit page. This is the opinionated user interface going here, right? So we're clicking on something and it's going to take us to a specific view edit page. Or if I go up to the toolbar and click on the new button, it's going to take me to the new page. So, I mean, these are pretty basic, pretty intuitive navigations, and they're really not that flexible. This is coded into the core of the Opus UI navigation. And it's why we call it opinionated. You really can't change this, so you can spend your time really focusing on what data do I show on these screens rather than, geez, how do I want to, make the whole system flow? So this is just one aspect of our opinionated UI that I wanted to share. We're going to go into more details later, but first I'm going to take another little commercial break and talk about. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've done on Opus that make this no-code environment an extremely efficient tool for developing solutions. So before I go into the details on what we did with Mint, I'm going to talk a little bit about theory. The feature we're talking about is called subtyping, and I'm just going to read it to you. The subtyping is a notion in programming language theory where a subtype, which is a data type, is related to a supertype based on the notion of substitutability, where program elements such as functions and subroutines that are written for the supertype will still operate if they're given a subtype instead. Now, we actually call them base types and not supertypes in our system in Opus, but I wanted to just take the definition as it is. So you have the supertype, you write some logic for it, and then any subtypes you create from that supertype automatically inherit that behavior. They automatically get that capability, and then you can further refine those subtypes as needed. Okay, that's the basic concept. So, so in practice, what we did with Opus is we created a single base type called business transaction object, or BTO for short. And this BTO object type knows everything it needs to know about exchanging B2B data and the pipeline processing that gets associated with that. So this includes, it knows how to take an inbound file that's being sent by a system and perform the inbound transformation on that from any external system that's submitted via an appropriate transport protocol. For example, AS2, SFTP, HTTPS. So again, this BTO object knows how to take any inbound file from any of the appropriate protocols, transform it into an internal canonical that Opus understands. It knows how to determine the target recipient, whether it's an enterprise system of yours or an enterprise system of one of your partners. It knows how to take that canonical that has been transformed and make it available to a business application for processing, which includes interacting with the object, transaction-specific data in the user interface. So in this case, this BTO takes the inbound transaction, the canonical that was created, gives it to Mint, makes it available so that it can be used in the UI. And then after that, any interaction has occurred and is finished, it then knows how to take that canonical, that modified canonical, and perform outbound transformation and then send it on to whoever that target recipient was. So all of that knowledge, all that pipeline processing of the B2B data from the time it came inbound to the time it gets sent outbound, and then again transferred over, whether it's AS2, SFTP, or HTTPS to the partner, all that's inherent in this BTO object base type. Now, what's really cool about this thing is the sender of a transaction, whether it's a purchase order or an ASN, a sender might be using AS2. It might be coming out of an SAP system. The receiver, well, they might be using SFTP or AS2. It doesn't matter. They might be using X12 to interact with it, but it doesn't matter what either side interacts, what protocols they use or what systems they use. This BTO object knows how to transform it on the way in, do things with it, and then transform it on the way out. So that's just built in. We did that one time. Now that we have, now that above processing is complex, and we've implemented it in such a way that for Mint, all they have to do now, when they want to add a new transaction type to the system, all they have to do is say they want to add a purchase order. They create the purchase order canonical, and this is something that TraceLink has been doing for years, and we're really good at it. We research all the industry standards like X12, Edifact, IDOCS, Wages, whether it's SAP or Oracle, and other standards and other systems out there that are pretty common. We research all of those, and we create this super universal canonical for that transaction type. That's step one that the Mint team does. Now that they have this canonical, the next thing they do is they create a handful of subtypes for that canonical. So in the case of, say, a purchase order, they'll create a sent purchase order, a received purchase order. So depending on whether you're the buyer or the seller, you're going to interact with a different subtype at your end. Or if you're doing manufacturing versus, say, commerce, there might be a different flavor of the purchase order that we will define as a BTO subtype. And the reason for that is we want to take that complex canonical that's structured in a way that's good for B2B and include that data on these subtypes, and then also include a UI-friendly version of that data so that it can easily be used when dragging and dropping the fields onto screens for your end users if they have to interact through the UI. And then once we've created the canonical, created a handful of subtypes, or created the handful of subtypes, then we write a few transforms. Typically we write the transforms for all those standard systems that we know we interact with, whether it's X12 or OAGIS, whatever it might be. Okay, so that's what, by leveraging this concept of subtyping with a base type that has all this knowledge in it, our Mint team is able to rapidly create a lot of transactions for our customers. In fact, just a little tidbit here. Last year, when the very first Mint application was released, the first version of it, they introduced, I believe it was around 15 transaction types, which had around 4 subtypes each and around 300 total screens that they had configured. And they did that with a relatively small team, less than half a dozen people, in about 3 weeks it was. It was an incredible, just lightning fast that they were able to get through all that. So this concept of subtyping a base type and leveraging that BTO that knows everything about transaction processing is a pretty huge thing for us. And it actually is really huge for our customers because it means we can deliver a lot of transactions very quickly. And the team, I don't know what count they're at now for how many transactions they support, but it's increased significantly since last year already. So let me move on to the next topic. So we've talked about a little bit about the business object metadata layer, and a little bit about the user interface metadata layer. I'm going to go talk a little bit more about those, and then also bring in some topics around the solution itself, that layer. So I mentioned earlier, we have these primary business objects, and they all have fields on them. And I sort of glossed over fields when I said that. You're probably thinking simple fields like due dates and company, customer name, things of that nature. But fields are actually, you want to put quotes around it when I say that, because fields are actually, they can be simple fields, like I just said, or they can be groups. Groups are, think of an address. Well, an address has a street 1, street 2, city, state, postal code, and perhaps other information on it. Or they can be collections. Collections are like lists of things. And a collection can be a collection of simple fields, so a list of related transactions, or a collection can be a list of groups. So it could be a collection of ordered items on a purchase order, so line items on a purchase order. So when I say fields, I'm actually thinking, I'm talking about fields, groups, collections of groups, collections of simple fields. It's all counted in that. And what's interesting about this is, as I start talking about dragging and dropping to create these pages in the user interface, like the new page or the search page, I grab a primary business object, say I'm going to do a page for this primary business object, and that object is going to have fields, groups, and collections on it. when I drag those, I'm not just dragging simple fields over to the screen and putting them on, in different locations. I'm actually dragging a very complex field in some cases. If I drag a collection onto the screen, I'm going to get a whole table, and that table is going to have buttons in it that let me add new items to it. So if I'm on a purchase order, I'm adding new line items. So when I say drag and drop, we're not just putting a little bit of text on the screen. We're actually bringing entire sets of behavior with it. So it's a pretty cool concept and very powerful. We also did talk about object operations, the nouns, or the verbs, the things the users can do. Well, some of the standard object operations like new, edit, view line up in search. They line up very nicely with the new page or the view edit page or the search page. So those pages, they already know, hey, if there's a standard object operation for this primary business called new, and I'm building a new page, well, I know how to wire that up and I know where to put the button. If I'm on a search page, I know what to do there, okay? And on a search page, I know that I also have the ability to do new items that show up in the search page. So I'm also going to wire up that object operation. So these things all happen automatically. Again, we're really driving home that opinionated user interface, that opinionated navigation, and making it as simple as possible for anyone building solutions with our OSE, our solution environment, to just drag things on the screen and change behavior. Now, I didn't mention this yet, but I'm going to talk about it now. That primary business object also has something called a workflow on it. So base objects all have workflows. Workflows have states and transitions between those states. Now, we define those as part of that lowest level metadata layer. But when you're in a solution and you're defining roles and permissions and things of that nature, and you might also want to tailor, in addition to what roles can see what screens and what buttons they can push, you also might want to tailor the workflow a little bit. In this case, that base state is already defined for you, and it might have a state called, say, in process. Well, if that's the case, but you say, well, in process is a little bit vague because I have in process when I do research, I have in process when I'm doing the product release, I have in process when I'm doing product launch, I have all these other in process steps. So you can create substates within a base state and articulate these details about your internal or business processes, or even business processes when you interact with your partners. So the business objects come with a base state, but you can enhance it, and that's by just configuring additional substates and transitions. So that's really sort of one thing that ties it all together. You've got that business object layer, you've got that UI layer that knows how these things all interact, how the different operations interact with the different pages, and now you also have the ability to fine-tune workflows. We're going to talk a little bit more about workflows in a minute, but I think that's it for this layer right now. Okay, so we're back at the UI layer and that middle layer. And we've already talked about the navigation and how that's opinionated, but I also want to explain a little bit more about the anatomy of any one of these different page types. We've talked about search, view, edit, new. I'm going to keep going on that theme because it'll be familiar. But every page has two main areas, content area and a toolbar. So let's say I'm on the search page, which you see at the back of the sort of the top here. The content area for the search page is that middle table area. And if you notice, the table headings are fields. So when I am defining my search page and I drag a field onto the screen, I'm going to get a column, a new column added to this table. And the name of that field is going to show up as the table header. Pretty obvious, pretty intuitive. So anyone building a solution is going to get that pretty quickly. As soon as they drag a field on the screen, it shows up like that, because it's all very much, as you do it, you see live what's going on. So that's a search page. That's the content area for a search page. If it's say a new page, look at the bottom right here, and I drag, let's say, a group onto the screen. Well, I'm not just dragging a single field over to the new page. I'm dragging a group that has 7 simple fields within it. So I've got delivery code terms, I've got payment terms, I've got PO number, order date, etc., whatever it might be. So I drag a group onto the new page, and I get all of that information right there for free. Now, another field, and this is just a single field, so it sounds simple, but it's actually a very complex field under the covers, is workflow. Workflow is just another field. We were talking about workflow a minute ago, how you might customize your workflow to have different steps in it. Well, this workflow is one for that beat comes from that BTO transaction object. And this workflow, you can see it's got about 7 steps here it goes through. And if I'm on the new page and I create a new purchase order, well, you can see that it's in the draft state. And to the right of that's a submit state, which I could move to once I have my purchase order ready to go. I don't have to do it in one shot, though. I could go up to the toolbar and hit the save button and save the purchase order in a draft state, come back later, open it up, add some more details to it. And then once I'm all done, I can push that little move to step, and the workflow field knows how to take this purchase order and actually start that whole BTO transaction processing pipeline. So that would be a good thing there. Now, so the content area. So I think the content area we understand. I just glossed over the toolbar area. That's the second part of any page anatomy is the toolbar. And the toolbar is where we put a couple of different things. We put object operations in the top. So you might have operations, the standard ones like new, or delete, or copy into, follow. These are some object operations you may get, or there can be page level actions up there. So a search page, for example, has a filter button that you can click, and then that brings out a little panel that you can then filter the search results, or a print or an export button for other operations that you might want to perform on the data. So again, the anatomy of every one of our pages, there's a content area and there's a toolbar area, and then the toolbars are the operations and actions that you can perform in the toolbar are organized in a consistent way. So again, trying to make things easy to use and easy to understand, and make it so that people don't have to make a lot of decisions when they're building these pages. We should sort of take care of that for you. I'm going to move on now to another kind of page type that we have and another application. So we've been talking about solutions, and we've been talking, which have new, view, edit, and search page types. We've also been talking about Mint, which has primary business objects of purchase orders, invoices, and ASNs, those types of things. Well, now we're going to look at the report builder. And fun fact, if you look over at the left and at the menu, you say, well, hey, I don't see purchase orders and invoices anymore. These are, not what I was expecting. But remember, now we're in the report and dashboard application. And that menu has the primary business objects for reports and dashboards, which are dashboards, reports, and query objects. So anyone who builds reports is going to know what a dashboard or report is, or what a query object is, and they're going to know how to work with them. So, so those are natural. Those are the primary business objects. So if I pick a different application like Mint, that left nav menu is going to show me Mint's primary business objects. If I'm in the solution builder and I go to that app, I'm going to see things that are related to solution builder over on the left-hand side, like pages. Okay. Now, back to the navigation. So this is a dashboard page that we're looking at, and it has a bunch of charts on it, and you can drag and drop those charts onto those reports onto the screen and put them in the positions you want. But the behavior, because it's a report and dashboard page, it inherently knows that I have a filter capability. So if you click that filter button, the little dashboard filter panel will slide out on the right, and a user can change some of the filtering parameters, and all those charts on that page will update based on that filter. It's really cool to watch. All the little bar charts and everything start moving around and changing shape, because maybe you want to look at the data for the last quarter, maybe you want to look at next week's data, or last year's data, whatever it might be. That filter is all very dynamic. And then also, if you were to say focus on one of those charts in the middle and click on, say, that big red area there of map in failed transactions, let's say, click on that. Well, our opinionated user interface knows I'm going to drill in on not only that report, but that report filtered by that data, and it's going to bring it up in a report screen and let you work with it from there. If you click on the little view report link that's in the top right of every one of these charts, then it's going to launch, again, a report screen, but it's going to launch it with all the data for that report and let you filter it from there if you want. But it'll give you all the data as opposed to the pre-filtered data in the previous example. So those are the dashboard areas in reports and dashboards. So now let me finish off here with a few key takeaways and before we get to the Q&A. So just to recap, our key takeaways, there's 5 of them. We have a unified no-code environment. OPUS has a unified no-code environment where we have offer up standard, marketplace, and company solutions, all utilizing the same no-code solution design environment with using drag and drop editing. And we offer up an opinionated UI, so the navigation's taken care of for everyone. And by simplifying the creation and configuration of solutions, so that's what this does, really. It just makes it really, really simple, whether it's our developers doing it, our partners doing it, or our customers. The second thing that you want to take away is we have a metadata-driven framework. No-code development and design starts with metadata definitions. It starts at the business object layer where we have nouns and in their characteristics, the fields on those business objects, and the operations that you can perform. And that metadata-driven behavior or framework, I should say, builds up to the user interface layer where we have our page types, new, search, view, edit, and the reports and dashboards. And then finally, the topmost layer is where we tie it all together with solutions, using menus and navigation with the roles and permissions. So that's the second takeaway you want to make sure you have. And the third is business objects and navigation. So business objects, those are always represented in the left navigation menu for whichever application you're in. Those menu items link users to search pages or report pages or dashboard pages. So there's 3 real options for any menu item over on the left. You can go to any one of these 3 kind of pages. And then there's consistent options, whether you're creating new records by hitting the new button, or you're doing a view edit because you click on one of the links for one of the rows in the pages. It all happens to be a very structured and intuitive UI flow. So I think the flow is pretty obvious and pretty well expected that you can think of that, but you can't really screw it up. It's all baked into the system. The fourth takeaway is configuration using subtyping and workflow extensions. This is where you can really tailor the system to your company's needs if needed, as you need to. So subtyping allows for tailored objects, like the Mint subtyping we talked about, where we create POs and invoices from the base BTO object. And then the workflows, you can extend those with substates and the different substate transitions. And this allows you really to adapt any solution to your needs once you've saved it down as a company solution. And the last thing to take away is really page structure and consistency, because for your end users, you really want your pages to follow a clear structure, using menus, page titles, sections, fields, and the operation buttons arranged in a consistent way across the top. That reduces both the design and decision overhead when you're building your solutions, or when we're building them, whoever's building them. And also it makes your users know what to expect. It's because the actions all become very intuitive and easy to learn, because across all the solution types that we have, that behavior is the same. And with that said, I'm going to go to the question and answer session part of this thing. And Laura, do you want to
Yeah, sure.
do you have any questions you want to kick off?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. That was extremely interesting, and thanks for the visuals and bringing it all to life, and showing the screenshots of how it looks and talking about the personas. I guess just before I ask my questions, I think well, actually, Lois, I'll ask you. Do you have a question?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay.
Puts on the spot there.
I would rather say not at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just saw you put something in the chat, and I was just curious to see if you had any questions before I jumped in. But I do have a couple. So just firstly, what solutions are most customers opting for at the moment? Is it the standard, the marketplace, or company solution, and why are they choosing that particular solution?
Yeah, good question. It depends. It depends on the product. For example, in master data, this solution was built with our compliance customers in mind and will likely be used out of the box by most of them. Some may make a few role or screen changes to increase user efficiency over time, but it isn't necessary. That application was built pretty much ready to go. Uh, Compare that with, say, Mint. The Mint solution, it was built with many transactions and orchestrations in mind, like manufacturing, commerce, etc. And it provides all expected flavors of the transaction subtypes and the screens that go with those, along with their commonly used fields already configured out of the box. Okay, so in this case, it's likely that customers will want to restrict the set of transactions that they expose to their end users. I mentioned how the first release of Mint had already 15 transaction types and 60 subtypes of those things. And 300 screens, which is probably over daunting. Most companies, when they start, they might start with 3 to 6 transactions, let's say. Some might even start with just one to begin with to get used to it. But the idea is, through the solution, by making a company solution rather than using a standard Mint solution, a customer can just simply go in there, configure the roles, and say, I'm only going to expose PO, ASN, and PO acknowledgements, or invoices and PO acknowledgements and POs. And then by configuring those roles, they can save that off. That's a very simple configuration, and pretty likely, because I doubt that too many companies will expose all of the transactions to all of their users, right? So they're going to carve those up. So that would be in Mint's case. Poet, for example, that solution was built with the intention that nearly all customers are going to tailor it, because it's about helping them manage a wide range of business processes, both internal and external, with their trade partners. And these processes are going to tend to vary dramatically from one customer to another. So we couldn't really come up with a standard, here's a Poet for everybody, but we did come up with a Poet set of base types for everybody, and then they can create their subtypes and extend them as needed. So Poet, we would expect a lot of people to use company solutions for that. And so we've covered standard solutions and the company solutions pretty well, but there's another one. There's the marketplace solutions that our partners do. We have one partner who put up a solution called Lab Books, and this partner implemented a very specialized solution. And in this case, customers are going to probably start with that marketplace solution as it is and just use it. And then some over time are likely going to start tailoring it as well. So it's sort of, it could be any of those three. It really depends on the need.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the actual application.
Yeah, and which application we're talking about. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And I guess that leads on to my next question a little as well. So the company solution, how long does it typically take to implement?
Oh, another good question. And again, it depends on the product and the extent to which customer want to tailor it. For example, Mint, that solution was built providing all those expected flavors of transaction stuff. So in this case, we already mentioned, most are going to do that simple configuration by defining at least roles and permissions to expose only the transactions that they decide to implement. Now that type of change, just configuring your roles and what permissions people have, that can take minutes to hours, plus some amount of testing. So to start to finish, it could be a few days. And then as solution designers become more familiar with it, that process will become much faster. Mm-hmm. Poet, on the other hand, that was built mostly just using the base object types I mentioned. And they have minimal fields needed for those base objects to have their inherent behavior for which they're intended to be used. For example, the base object types in Poet are like things like tasks and lists and a few others. And the expectation is customers will define their own subtypes of tasks or own subtypes of lists and implement the business processes to fit their need. So I would expect this type of configuration work to be on the order of weeks. Again, depending on how many subtypes and fields a company decides to implement, it'll vary. And the actual time of doing the configuration work is likely just hours to days, but then there's always that testing time. And if you're creating all these different subtypes and putting a lot of fields on it, you're going to want to run it through a bunch of test cases and make sure that you've covered all your use cases properly and do some user testing before you expose it to everybody. So that one's probably going to take a little longer, but again, the work itself is relatively simple because you're just dragging and dropping fields on the screen. It's really pretty basic, pretty simple.
Great, thank you, Jerry. So I just want to check, Lois, do you have any questions now? No pressure, but I just want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to ask if this recording would be accessible after the session, and if yes, where can I find it? I would like to go over it. I must say a lot of insightful information, and I would want to listen to it again. And the second one would be, if it's available and after listening to it, is there any email or provision for want to ask further questions for clarification?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the recording will be posted on TraceLink University. So you can go in. It typically takes a day to two for it to be posted onto TraceLink University. And it's there's a tile that's called Tech Talks. So when you signed up for the Tech Talk, that's under the live sessions, but there is a separate tile for accessing the recordings for all the Tech Talks. I think I've been running them for about 3 years now, I'd like to say, but I probably got that time completely wrong. But there's a catalogue, and the latest will be at the top. And to ask any further questions, please feel free to email tracelinkuniversity@tracelink.com. And if it's a question specifically for Jerry, sure I can just ask that question to Jerry.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this was fun. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll be happy to do another one in the future about no code. And thank you, Lois, for joining. And thanks, Jerry. That was really interesting.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Take
bye.
care. Bye. Bye.